Hey, welcome back to part two of my analysis of Morgan Stanley's World Cup of Watches Premier League table. Actually, it's their industry analysis for 2023. Today, what I want to look at is the top 50 watch companies that they list and compare that to the top 50 watch companies of 2021, so just 2 years ago, and look at the 6 companies that left and the 6 companies that came in. And I think this one video is all you need to understand what's happening in the watch industry today.
Last clear, Dennis, go ahead. And I'll come to it. This is Houston, speaking,
Hi, I'm Pete McConville, and I like to overthink, overanalyze, and just geek out on watches more than any grown man should. But if that sounds like your jam, keep watching. And if you like what I do, like, subscribe, and do all that YouTube stuff at the end. What I'm doing at the moment, this is kind of part two, second installment of my analysis of the Morgan Stanley Watch Report for 2024, which are the results of 2023. Every year, Morgan Stanley puts these out, but it seems like every second year we get a much richer picture. We get a full breakdown of the top 50, how many watches they sold, their overall turnover, implied average retail sale. A lot more interesting. So what I've started doing is whenever I do this, I compare just the big top 50 lists. So this is 2023 compared with 2021. A, there's more data. B, that longer time period gives little short-term perturbations time to sort of oscillate out, and instead we can look at real underlying trends. Okay, so it's been a thing. People have been using that horrible word premiumization. People, pushing the idea that prices are pushing up, brands are trying to get up the ladder, that sort of thing. I don't think anything spells out what's happening in the world of premiumization more than what I'm about to talk about now. The 6 brands that left the top 50 and the 6 brands that came in to the top 50. So what you're going to see is that entry-level volume sellers are leaving the top 50. They're not closing down. They're still selling, but they're no longer in the top 50 brands. And small boutique brands that sell, in some cases, literally dozens of watches a year are making actually into the top 50. So let's look at the brands that are gone. In no particular order, a brand called Titoni. A bit of a boutique Swiss brand that sells predominantly into Asia. Not a brand that ever made our kind of as an enthusiast, not a brand that was ever high on our radar, but they were selling around about $72,000 watches a year at an average price of 1,350-ish Swiss francs. So they were a real player. Well, they're gone. They're no longer in the top 50. Calvin Klein or CK Watch. Now, they sold cheap watches. Average price back then in 2021, 293 Swiss francs each. However, they did sell 340,000 of them every year. They are no longer in the top 50. Victorinox, a brand that does turn up on our kind of enthusiast radar, selling a lot of sort of Garter quartz type stuff. A lot of people are sort of into them. 230,000 odd people a year are into buying those watches at around about $600 each. They're out. Maurice Lacroix, a brand that lives on the edge of enthusiasts' opinions. I think that a little bit like, say, Raymond Weil, they're not a brand that people leap to as an enthusiast brand, but I think most watch enthusiasts would know of them, could name a watch or two that they make, would have some sort of opinion on them. That makes sense. They do make 70,000 watches a year. They average price is about 760 Swiss francs, ballpark, back in 2021. They are no longer on the list. So, Totoni, 72,000, not enough to get you on the list. CK Watch, they've largely collapsed, I think so, but their 340,000 watches doesn't make it anymore. Victorinox, with their 230,000 odd sales a year, don't make the list. Maurice Lacroix, with their 70,000 sales a year, don't make the list. And there is one other, and that's CF Bucherer. Smaller brand, 20,000 watches a year, still with an average retail price of 3,800 Swiss francs a year. They are also gone from the list. I forgot to mention them earlier, so they're off. Sorry for the interruption. This is Ed Sweet Pete. As I went through the editing for this video, I realized I'd left out one of the affordable end brands that was in the top 50 but is no longer, and that is Mondaine. Mondaine of the Swiss rail clock and watch fame. They used to have a turnover of 50 million Swiss francs. They used to sell 350,000 watches a year at an average price of 219 Swiss francs each. And yeah, selling 350,000 watches at that kind of price doesn't even qualify you as a top 50 brand anymore. But what's interesting, so we're talking there about watches in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. The most expensive of those watches is 3,800 Swiss francs. The cheapest is, call it 300 Swiss francs. Now, let's look at the brands that have come in. And I'm going to start at the brand that is selling the cheapest watches on average that has made the new list. And that is Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, with an average price of 4,700 Swiss francs, which is 900 Swiss francs more than Carl F. Bucherer that left the list. They are now they're the cheapest watch brand that has now made the list of the top 50, selling 35,000 odd watches a year. In no particular order after that, you've got Gerard-Perregaux. They're selling, their average sell price is 15,000 watches, 15,000 Swiss francs per watch, and they sell around about 9,500. Moser, they're selling, their average price is 37,000 Swiss francs. And they're selling around about 3,500 watches a year. Parmigiani, another brand, with their average price being around 35,000 Swiss francs each. They're selling 3,000 watches a year. Jacob & Cope, a little bit surprised they haven't been on the list before, but that's a point for later. They're selling, their average price is $85,000 a year, $85,000 per unit. And they're selling around about 2,700, 2,750 watches per year. And then, of course, Greubel Forsey, whose average selling price is a whopping 313,000 Swiss francs per watch. And they get into the top 50 by selling just 255 watches per year. So what you're looking is brands that were selling watches for, in general, 1,000 Swiss francs or less, with one exception, and selling tens, if not hundreds of thousands of watches a year, no longer make the top 50 brands. Instead, you want to be selling at least 5,000 Swiss francs. Probably you want to be 15,000 Swiss francs or more. And you can make it into the top 50 selling as little as 3,000 to 4,000 watches a year. Nothing says, nothing describes the premiumization of the watch market, the race to the top, better than the six entry-level bargain brands are no longer, despite selling tens, if not hundreds of thousands of watches, no longer make the top 50. And they're being replaced by people who are selling 250, 1,000, 3,000 watches a year. To be honest, that says it all. I did say earlier that there was one more thing I was going to suggest, one more thing I wanted to talk about, and I'll get into that now. I do think, though, when you look at these brands, the brands that have come and gone, I do begin to worry about the data, not so much worry about the data, but I get a feeling like the data and the data collection is changing. Back in 2021, to make the list, to get in the top 50, you had to have a turnover of around about 35 million Swiss francs per year. That seemed to be the magic number that got you into number 49 or number 50. But if we look at some of the brands that have suddenly leapt onto the stage, you've got Jacob & Co. that is this year being reported as having a turnover of 146 million Swiss francs. Parmigiani with a turnover of 66 million Swiss francs. Louis Vuitton with a turnover of 162 million Swiss francs. So what that's saying is, what this would be trying to say is that the turnover of Jacob & Co. has increased by a factor of greater than 4, I think, or around 4, call it. So it's gone from less than 35 million Swiss francs to 146 million Swiss francs in 2 years. Parmigiani's gone from less than 35 to 66 in less than 2 years. Louis Vuitton has gone from less than 35 to 162 in 2 years. I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's real. My suspicion is that over the last 2 years, the credibility, the attention paid to the Morgan Stanley listings has probably risen. And that brands, particularly smaller boutique private brands like Jacob & Co., like Parmigiani, not so much LV, like Grubel Forsey, like Moser, who do rely on bank loans, do rely on credit, do rely on partners and so forth to support them, have seen that being featured in this report, having nice things said about you, showing that you're a serious player, a top 50 brand, having it kind of independently verified is useful to you. And I suspect that those companies have started opening the books, even if it's just on the QT, with the Morgan Stanley Lux Consult people. They've allowed their ADs to say a little bit more about what's going on. They've perhaps, let some more detail slip so that suddenly brands, which in the past, because remember, these are quite small brands, would have been relatively easy for them to hide that information, which I think they were doing. I suspect they're letting that out now, and that this stratospheric growth that we've been seeing actually isn't that rapid, that these brands probably would have been on the list or could have been on the list like 2 years ago. So I do think, I continue to believe that these brands are growing. These brands are exploding. I'm not sure that they're necessarily growing as fast as we think, and that instead there could have been a change to the reporting culture, let's say, around some of these brands as well. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to wrap this one up. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about Breitling, a brand that a lot of you have asked me about because I'm a bit of a Breitling guy. I've been Pete McConville. If you like what I do, like what I say, just find this interesting, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff, and I will see you later. Bye.